Hey, where are you right now? I'm just at home, resting. I've been searching for my husband here, but he's nowhere to be found. I think he's lying to me. Let me take you back to when I was pregnant with our first child. My name is Ashley, and I was about to give birth in a month, just a few weeks away. I was 9 months pregnant, full of excitement, but also apprehensive about the challenges of childbirth and new parenthood. I had planned to visit my parents' house this weekend to get some help from them. I mentioned this to my husband during a calm period of my pregnancy, but I assumed he'd forgotten, so I brought it up again today. While we were lounging and watching TV, my husband casually said, "Going back to your parents?" "Oh yeah, I think you mentioned that. If you want to go, just go. It's not like I'll have any trouble without you." I was shocked by his indifference, but I didn't want to start an argument, so I chose not to push back. "Well, I'm heading over this weekend. I'll be giving birth next month and plan to stay with my parents for a month or two after that. I should be back in about 3 months. Please make sure the baby's room is clean and ready." Sure. I would have done that anyway. "And by the way, I can't see you off this weekend because I've got work." "Oh, all right." I had hoped he would at least come with me to the station, but that hope was quickly dashed. I knew he was a workaholic, often working even on weekends and always seeming too busy. But I wished he could spare a moment to consider how difficult it would be for me, heavily pregnant and managing a lot of luggage, to navigate the train. I understood he was busy, but I often felt lonely. I didn't want our soon-to-be-born baby to feel that way too. I was anxious about whether we'd be able to raise our child together at this rate. When did he become so distant? With these mixed emotions, I began packing. Since I had some time before returning to my parents' house, I decided to send most of my luggage, except for valuables, via home delivery service. I had been hoping to welcome the baby into a clean home. I'd started maternity leave a bit early and had cleaned every corner of the house, preparing a space for the baby and setting up the crib. I was excited about starting a new life as a family of 3 when I returned in 2.5 months. But my husband's careless habits had already started to undo my hard work. He would leave half-drunk bottles scattered around and cardboard boxes from online purchases open and abandoned. Reflecting on it, I realized I had never seen him cook or clean since we got married. Despite my efforts to keep things tidy, the house was getting more disordered by the day, and I worried about its state while I was away. The weekend arrived in the blink of an eye, and I left for my parents' home. Meanwhile, my husband went to work without even seeing me off. While relaxing at my parents' house, I kept in touch with my husband regularly. We exchanged emails every day, and I called him about once every 3 days. However, over time, he started answering my calls less frequently. When I did manage to reach him and asked, "You haven't been picking up the phone lately. Are you busy?" he would respond vaguely with, "Yeah, sort of," or "Not really." I became concerned and asked, "You're not cheating on me, are you? I've heard that some men do that when their wives are pregnant." His response was sharp and defensive. "Why would I do that? It's annoying that you're doubting me." His irritation made me uneasy, and I quickly apologized, saying, "Sorry, I didn't mean to upset you." I knew it wasn't healthy to worry too much while carrying our baby, so I decided I needed to trust him. A few weeks later, as my labor pains began, I called my husband to let him know I was preparing to go to the hospital. I felt embarrassed by my pain, but I wanted him to be there for the birth. Surely, he would want to be present for such a significant moment. "My labor has started. It usually takes about half a day for a first child to be born, so you should be able to make it if you start now. I want you to be there for the birth. You can even cut the umbilical cord." He responded with a sigh of annoyance. "Oh, what? You want me to come by train right now? I'm tired too, and have work tomorrow." "Work? Our child is being born right now. Isn't that more important?" "Shut up. There's no substitute for my job. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. It won't happen again. I've told you, my job can't be replaced. If I don't do it, everything falls apart. You just don't get it. I'm hanging up now because I'm busy." I tried to convince my husband to be present for the birth, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. After being abruptly disconnected on the phone, I cried through the labor pains, feeling abandoned and disheartened. Why was my husband so indifferent to the birth of our child? From the moment a mother discovers she's pregnant, her child becomes her top priority, but my husband seemed completely detached. I faced my first childbirth alone in solitude. The labor lasted a full day, and the next day, a tiny, adorable boy came into the world. He was so small, so precious. After being discharged, my parents showered our baby with love and guided me through the basics of childcare. A month quickly passed, and by then, I had become proficient at bathing the baby. My parents voiced their concerns, saying, "Are you sure you're okay with such a husband? We're worried about you going back." I tried to reassure them. "I think I can manage. My health is improving faster than I expected, so I might return next week. Don't push yourself too hard. Let us know if you need anything." "Thank you, I will." Despite the saying that a postpartum body is like someone who has been in a car accident, my spirits were high thanks to the hormones, and my body was recovering well. I had also adapted to taking care of the baby, so I decided to return home a bit earlier than planned. During my time at my parents' house, there was hardly any contact from my husband, and even when I sent photos and videos of our son, his reactions were tepid. I hoped that perhaps a father's feelings would develop once he interacted with the baby. That thought kept me going. I arranged for my parents to drop me off at home without telling my husband. Since it was his day off, I assumed he would be there. I wondered how he would react when he saw our child for the first time. Would he like our home? After a few hours' drive, we finally arrived home. I carried my son while my parents handled our luggage and unlocked the door. What greeted us was a dark, silent room. "We're home a bit early, but we're back," I called out. "Hey, no one's here." "And what's that smell?" my father asked. As we entered the living room, a foul odor hit us. Turning on the light revealed a scene I had never imagined. The room looked like a disaster zone. Dirty dishes and half-eaten pizza were piled in the sink. Clothes, food wrappers, and trash were strewn everywhere. Moldy juice sat in an open container, heaving off a putrid smell. The table was covered in stains and grime. The shower and sink were coated in black mold, and the toilet was filthy. The crib we had prepared for our son was cluttered with discarded cardboard boxes and garbage bags. I had specifically asked him to keep the place clean in preparation for our baby, but the state of the house was shockingly far from acceptable. I was especially upset that the crib was soiled. "Hey, isn't this too much? How are we supposed to raise a baby in a place like this?" My parents were outraged and searched the house, checking each room for my husband, but he was nowhere to be found. Where could he be on his day off? Maybe he's working another weekend shift. But we can't be sure his weekend shifts were real. He's not on commission, so working weekends wouldn't increase his salary, and his company should follow a standard calendar. I've been dubbing his excuses for disappearing on weekends for a while now. "Let's try calling him," I suggested. Unable to endure the sight of the cluttered room any longer, I ushered my confused parents outside and called my husband. He didn't answer initially, but after my third attempt, he finally picked up. "Hey, where are you now?" I asked. "I was at home." "Why?" he responded. "At home." We had searched every room of the house, and neither my parents nor I had seen him. Could he be buried under the mess? It seemed unlikely given the lack of any sign of his presence, and his voice didn't sound like someone who had just woken up. Then I heard a woman's voice in the background. I couldn't make out her words, but it was definitely a woman's voice. In that moment, everything clicked. He's cheating on me. I couldn't believe he would be unfaithful while neglecting our child. The state of the house was a disgrace. My anger surged as I realized that while we were away, he had been unfaithful and let the house fall into disarray. I was fed up. If he cared so much for the other woman, that he could have her. "How can you live in such a filthy, rotting-smelling house?" "Oh, I see. Maybe a burglar came in. I need to report this to the police." "Huh. You're at your parents' house, right? What are you talking about?" My frustration boiled over as I confronted him. I raised my voice, unable to contain my anger. "You're the one lying about being at home, aren't you? Stop playing dumb. It's unacceptable to turn the crib into a garbage dump. I'm not coming back to this house. We're getting a divorce." I spoke quickly and hung up the phone. Determined to make a point, I reported to the police that we had been victims of a burglary. I instructed my parents and son to return to my parents' house and waited for my husband in front of our home. The police arrived before he did, and I welcomed them into the house as though I were hosting guests. Soon after, my husband showed up, and to my shock, he was accompanied by a woman. His face showed clear signs of panic. "Hey, you weren't supposed to be back until next month. And who is she?" The woman next to him glared at me, her arms crossed. "And who are you?" she demanded. Despite confronting his mistress, I felt a surprising calmness. I decided to question the woman. It turned out my husband had been seeing her while hiding the fact that he was married. I was so disgusted with him that I was almost numb. Hey, at least hear me out, my husband pleaded. He reached for my shoulder, but I quickly swatted his hand away, refusing to be touched by him. Don't touch me, it's revolting. The police are already checking the room, and I hope you're embarrassed having them see the mess you've created. I'm leaving now. You can explain everything to the police. Goodbye. With that final remark, I headed back to my parents' house, leaving my husband and the woman stunned. He called repeatedly, but I ignored him. That night, I finally decided to respond. It turned out he had managed to explain the situation to the police who, while pinching their noses against the stench and struggling to navigate the filthy room, made his predicament even more humiliating. After being abandoned by the woman he had been deceitful with, all that remained for my husband was his shame and a home in Desiree. Come on, I'm sorry. Please come back. I've been looking forward to seeing our son, he pleaded over the phone. If he genuinely felt remorseful, he should have come to my parents' house in person. Trying to smooth things over with a phone call showed how little he understands the gravity of his actions. I can't imagine a future with him. You never showed any interest before, and now you suddenly care. You weren't even there when I gave birth, despite my multiple requests for you to come. Well, I thought you knew I would come eventually. I'll clean up the room. I can't manage the household without you. I need you. I could almost hear his desperation and breathlessness through the phone as he continued to plead. No matter how much you beg, it's not happening. You should have kept that woman if you can't handle housework. Let her deal with it for you. But that was just a fling. It was a momentary lapse. You're the only one for me, Ashley. A fling? Didn't you see her every time you claimed to be working overtime? Well, that's a different, I pressed my husband, who was fumbling for excuses until he finally admitted that he had been cheating on me with several women from his high school who he reconnected with at a friend's wedding. He's a scumbag no matter how you look at it. There's no point in discussing this further. Listening to his voice break into desperate apologies, I felt a chill. I can't believe it. You disgust me. Were you planning to touch our son with those hands? That's unthinkable. I won't do it again. I'll come to pick you up right now. I want to see you and our son. I'll prove my sincerity. Let's go home together. I could barely believe the audacity of his words. What are you thinking? I can't trust you anymore. There's nothing more to discuss. I will raise our son on my own. Ashley, please forgive. I cut him off by hanging up, the finality of the call resonating in my ears. Our brief marriage had come to an end. Half a year has passed since then. I've started working with the support of my parents, and once I've saved enough, I plan to move out and live independently with my son. I'm currently negotiating the divorce, primarily focused on securing alimony. My husband, struggling with the responsibilities of living alone, has let his household become chaotic, often eating out and leaving the place in disarray. But that is no longer my concern. My focus is on providing the best life I can for my son, filled with love and care.